Hello, and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malaman in Highland Park, New Jersey, Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shamet. With me, as always, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, somewhere in Long Island, Solomon Schechter Day School on Long Island, and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky at the Anshe Chesed in New York City from the sanctuary, the wood paneled sanctuary.
New location.
It's a new location. Mishaneh Makom. Mishaneh, nothing. Mishaneh Torah. We're in Tetzaveh. This is really one of the greatest Parsha. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says, this is one of the greatest Parshas ever. Tetzaveh is actually a fantastic Parsha. If you like clothing, if you like the idea of the aesthetic, and we're going to talk about some of this. But first, let's take the opener. Shemen Zayit Zach. Explain what Shemen Zayit Zach is, Jeremy.
It is absolutely pure olive oil. Olive oil is considered, they didn't have compact fluorescents. They didn't have LEDs. Pure olive oil was the cleanest, most fragrant burning fuel. And so for all purposes, for lighting, for anointing, you were supposed to have the top of the line olive oil. And that's
best olive oil ever. Gives off a clean light, a smokeless flame. Very important if you are kindling light in a confined space. You don't want smoke because it'll dirty up all the curtains. Barry?
Or if you're vaping.
Or if you're what?
You're vaping. It's also good.
Ner Tamid. La'alot Ner Tamid. Explain Ner Tamid, Barry Chesler.
So the Ner Tamid is the light that has to be regularly lit. It's in the Kodesh, one of the sections of the Mishkan, and it's to provide light because otherwise the room would be dark and there's work that has to be done. It's where the showbread was displayed on the shulchan, and it's where the incense was burned. And therefore, every morning and every evening, the Kohanim would have to light the Ner Tamid. We think of it as eternal light, but better understood as a regular light, just like the Tamid offering was the regular offering offered twice a day. And what's striking for us, I think, is that when we look at a synagogue, when we go into the sanctuary, most of us at some point, perhaps the first place we look is to see the Ner Tamid, the eternal light. And there, in our synagogue, the eternal light is symbolic. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording that in, I guess, 100, maybe 150 years ago, the eternal light in a synagogue would have to be lit. But we now use electricity, and now it's on all the time, or can be on all the time. And it provides a different symbol for us. I think that we vest our sense of eternality of a people in this electric eternal light.
I was thinking about the old Yom Kippur prayer for communal well-being is for the people notnim ner la'maor gayin l'kidushu lahavdalah. You give the lamps to illuminate, because the synagogue is a place symbolically and physically of light. Now, one of the main things, we didn't really talk about this, I think we touched on it maybe last week, but we didn't really get into it, is that the Mishkan and the Mikdash are told in such ways that they call to mind Genesis chapter 1. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe Genesis chapter 1 calls to mind the construction of the Mikdash. There's a way in which we're building a cosmos here. And what's the first thing that God did when creating the real cosmos is let there be light. So
we had to see what he was doing.
He should have just taken his phone and put on the spotlight. But but having light is for that reason like totally symbolic, because that is one of the primary elements of creation.
So I think this is a key theme. It's going to obviously appear as we go further into these parshiot, the Vayakal Bakude, again with the whole structure, but again also the connection that we make from these parshiot to the synagogue, the Ner Tamid, and of course we're going to see in a moment or two the clothing of the Kohen, which appears in the synagogue in various forms. But go ahead, Barry.
I want to just add one other point, that we live in a world where we're blessed with technology that does a lot of things for us. And we have to remember that the eternal light used to have to be tended to. And so much of what went on in the Mishkan required human presence. Now, a lot of things that we do, we could set in motion and let them work on their own. And it's obviously a lot easier for us from a technological point of view to live in the 21st century, but sometimes it takes us away from the arena of action because we become spectators because technology does the job that we used to do.
Right, and so the symbols themselves become, in a way, they adapt to the new circumstances, the new technologies. Okay, let's look at 28, verse 2. Ve'asita vigde kodesh la'aron achicha lechavod u'letifaret. And this introduces the whole theme of the parsha, or at least the beginning. You shall make clothing of the holy to Aaron, your brother, lechavod u'letifaret. And I'm going to translate lechavod u'letifaret as for glory and splendor, or glory and beauty. These two words, chavod and tifaret, actually appear elsewhere in Jewish tradition. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to talk just in general now, or ask the two of you to reflect on the role of beauty and the role of the aesthetic sense in worship. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. We have a somewhat misplaced sense. You know, it comes from a whole bunch of things. It comes from, we talked about this last week a little bit, you know, the sense that Judaism loves time more than space, and we don't have, you know, Notre Dame Cathedral in our history. It comes from a sense, you know, maybe in our particular generation, a post World War II, like, you know, 60s generation, a baby boom generation that doesn't like fanciness, that likes something a little bit sparer. Maybe we're a little bit suspicious of religious splendor, of kavod and tifaret. Maybe we like things a little bit more stripped down. But I think it's in significant ways a mistake, because the aesthetic dimension of human life is, you know, it can awaken us to all kinds of beauty and rapture. And so we do have another religious / aesthetic value in Judaism that's relevant here, which is called hidur mitzvah, making the mitzvah beautiful. There's the line in the crossing of the Red Sea, Ze'eli ve'anvehu, this is my God and I will glorify him. And Jewish tradition, rabbinic tradition, means that this is your God, and you should make the instruments of worship and Jewish communal life as beautiful as possible. So the Mishkan, with Chelet Agaman v'Tolat Shani, all the threads that go into the Mishkan are supposed to be blue and purple and crimson, wound around the kind of whitish blacks. They're gold threads, and everything is sewn. And you can only imagine, especially in a gray world, how radiant it was. And the Kohen too, as a kind of exemplar of human perfection. Now, again, in our world, we're suspicious of. We don't believe in ideals of perfection. We think that they kind of make other people feel bad, and they're kind of exclusive. But the Torah, I think, is saying something a little different. Is saying, look at this gorgeousness. Look at how beautiful this can be. And so the priest representing the people is to wear things that just dazzle, and to make the Am Yisrael, whom the high priest represents, say, "Oh my goodness, look at that beauty."
So I want to add another point here, and that is that the kavod and the tiferet are a reflection of God. That a lot of times when we look at what a person wears, we say, not those clothes are beautiful, but that person is beautiful. And I think what the Kohen is doing, he's wearing things of beauty to reflect God's beauty. And we're not supposed to look at the Kohen and say, look how beautiful he is, but look how beautifully he serves God. And that's an important point, I think, and an important distinction, because there is this tension. You know, we all know the expression, the clothes make the man, the clothes make the woman, but here we see a kind of dissonance between the clothes themselves and the person wearing them, and we don't want to confuse the two.
Well, I think this elicits a certain tension in our life, and Jeremy, you touched on it, because we all live now in a time where clergy, especially, which are the descendants of priesthood in the Torah, we basically don't adorn ourselves with these kinds of garments. I think that the robes of the rabbi and robes of clergy probably went out in the 70s, although there are some holdouts in them. I don't know if they're coming back. Jeremy, gonna wear a robe in shul? They're coming back anytime?
Just part of my Purim costume. I'll wear my bathrobe.
Exactly. No, we wear the kittel on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and the kittel is a very, very unique kind of robe because it's white, it's minimalist. It's also it's purity and death. Death. The kittel is worn, by the person for the beyond. But we've let that go, and I think partly because of the egalitarian impulse. We do not want to differentiate ourselves from people, and I think also because the aesthetic sensibilities have changed. Look, we're not the only ones to remark on the fact that if you look at the construction of synagogues, in the last, 30, 40 years, it's very different from the ways people have constructed synagogues 100 years ago. The care, the level of architectural detail, they're all different. The aesthetics are different. You come to my shul. My shul was built, 2006 to 2009. Beautiful, but minimalist. The parochet is just plain white. It's not even ornamented at all. And you project on it what you want. And that reflects a different kind of sensibility. Barry, you want to say something?
The Christian.
Go on, Jeremy.
I was just going to remark that when I'm in an interfaith setting, Christian clergy all have their vestments, and they say, "Well, wear your vestments." And I do not. I know some of our colleagues will come with a tallis. I just do not do that. I really can't. I don't feel it to wear what is for me a mitzvahdic garment in that kind of display. But the Christians, they all have, first of all, those especially who are themselves Black or with large numbers of Black congregants, they'll have, the African inflected, there'll be the LGBTQ, the rainbow inflected, as well as whatever in the Christian liturgical calendar. They have different colors for different times of the year, the Lent and the Advent and all those different colors. I think that those religious communities have come to expect that there is for clergy some kind of particular getup, uniform that enables them to serve with a kind of kavod v'tiferet.
Right. It's worth thinking about the function of a uniform. A uniform makes everyone, in a certain sense, the same. Right. In other words, we don't distinguish ourselves by the clothes we wear when we wear our vestments. We're wearing things that other clergy people are wearing as well. What makes the high priest unique is that the high priest is the only one who's going to wear his clothing. The regular Kohen has a smaller amount of clothing, of articles of clothing, and they're slightly different. He has just the basics, the shirt, the pants, and not all the things that make the Kohen Gadol so distinguished.
So there is a narrative in this text here about beauty, lechavod u'letifaret. I think there's also a relationship between beauty and justice, because we have other verses that say, Kohanecha yilbeshu tzedek, let your priests wear or comport themselves with righteousness or with justice. So there is a relationship between beauty and the just. And there is a narrative being told. And it's interesting what kind of narrative we are telling when we don't wear robes, and the narrative that our Christian counterparts are telling when they do wear robes, and you've touched on some of them. And I think the basic narrative that we have when we are wearing our suits or other kinds of clothing, our female clergy colleagues, also have their comportment. We're telling a story of peoplehood, really, and belonging to the people in this way, with reflections of the priesthood in the talit and the colors, maybe in some form or another. But there are in the text here, it says ve'ela begadim asher yasu choshen ve'efod me'il ketonet tashbetz mitznefet ve'avnet. In English, a breastplate piece, an ephod, a robe, a quilted tunic, a mitre, a sash. There are 7 pieces of the high priestly wardrobe. That's not an accident. 7 is the important number here. 7. So the basic narrative is, in addition to glory and splendor representing God, representing the people, there's the narrative of wholeness of creation. 7 is the number of creation. And so the priest is reflecting that. And we're going to see, certainly in Vayakel and Pekude, how that, that theme of creation really itself gets woven into the whole structure.
It's not just creation, it's recreation as well, because this is a creation that keeps on going. And that, I think, makes a powerful statement, because creation in our tradition is not a one-time event. It's something that has to be renewed.
So we have a couple of very important implements here. Just before, let's talk about the Petil Techelet. There is the Kohen Gadol wears a kind of crown, and there's a blue cord on the crown, and the Kohen also wears a blue tunic, and there are blue cords on the tunic, and of course the tzitzit have al kanaf Petil Techelet. So what is the Petil Techelet? What does Techelet mean? Just remind us, Jeremy. Give me some Techelet.
Some Techelet. Well,
Tachlis about Techelet.
what?
Some tachlis about Techelet.
Talking about Techelet. Well, in Kabbalistic terms, Techelet does represent the Shekhinah, who is the Tachlit, the Tachlis of all the Spirot who make their way down, flow into her. It is the sky blue, the in our own day, the 20th century, the ancient royal blue dye has been recovered in this masterful work of Torah scholarship and archaeology and chemistry, largely thanks to the great Rabbi Yitzchak Halevi Herzog, who was the chief rabbi, first of Ireland and Britain, and then ultimately of Eretz Yisrael, and was himself trained as a chemist and was able to discover the ancient Techelet. It comes from this sea mollusk called a Murex truculus and trunculus, whatever it is, and the rabbis say, the chilazon snail thing looks like the sea looks like the sky looks like the throne of glory. It's kind of a rapturous meditation that you see the infinity of the ocean and the infinity of the sky, and that's woven into your clothing. So you're kind of wearing heaven. You're wearing a little remembrance of the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory. And the word Techelet might mean something like epitome, the essence of color, or something like that. But
so what then is the significance of tzitzit, Kanaf Petil Techelet? What is tzitzit to connect us to heaven, or tzitzit to connect us to Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh? You are a people, a holy.
I'm going to go with the only reasonable answer that poetic sensibility can give you, which is yes. Okay, so I think that first of all, it is absolutely true, as you were alluding to, that in an ancient world, some people, this is what Barry's point about shared uniforms or unique ones. Some people, the king people, got to wear royal blue, and everybody else was wearing kind of dingy clothes. And it's absolutely the case that the Torah is saying every single person should have a little thread of malchut, a little thread of blue in your clothing, so everybody partakes of the majesty. But I do think that the rabbi's other teaching that I said is also true, that it's somehow a little bit of sky in your clothing.
So this then leads us to other things that the Kohen Gadol wears, and let's talk about the breastplate and specifically the Urim and Tumim. What are the Urim Tumim? And we're not going to name all the different precious stones here, although we could. Barry, the Urim and Tumim function. They have an aesthetic function, they have a literary function, and they have a, I guess, oracular function.
Or oracular function. So it was used to divine God's wish. And it may be akin to dice. And when you think of dice have 6 sides. You have a pair of dice, that's 12. So that would be the 12 stones on the breastplate, perhaps. And it was invoked at various times to find out what God wanted us to do. I believe it comes up in the story of King Saul and later with David as well. There is an interesting idea that we need to discover ways to access God. And that quest to access God is as old as our people is. And one of the ways is through the priesthood. And the priest stands for God in a certain sense, but he also needs access to God, and the Urim and Tumim would allow him to do that. On this breastplate with the 12 stones, 12 also reminds us of the 12 tribes. And the verse in the Torah connects those 12 stones with the 12 tribes. And in a sense, the Kohen is wearing the children of Israel. He is the embodiment of the collective people. And that speaks volumes.
Jeremy, the role of the Urim and Tumim, and then maybe it drops off, and just in your relationship or your take on it, your thoughts.
I have to say that what Barry said is 100% correct. It is this oracular thing. Nobody knows exactly what it is beyond, of course, the motto of Yale University. Figure. It is mentioned in those narratives that you said, and also in Zot HaBracha, right? Urecha v'tumech l'Levi Omar, urecha v'tumech l'Ish Chasidecha. Levi, you hold these oracular powers. You know, whatever. I'm into the poetic side of religion. I'm into the mystical side in a big way. Oracles, it doesn't do it for me. Wearing the jewels on your heart, inscribed literally. There was, what's that called? Lapidary, where you inscribe in gemstones. Literally inscribed with the names of the tribes on your heart, and then also there's like there's a poncho quality here. It's over the shoulder, and there's these other two stones that serve as buttons, like somehow the whatever the hook goes around, and those also have the names of the tribes on them. It's exactly as Barry said. This was to me really poetic that the Kohen Gadol becomes the avatar of the people because it's been inscribed on his clothing. And I think of this, by the way, my own kavanah when I put on tefillin is, Shema Yisrael is becoming part of my body in the way that the 12 Shvatim are becoming part of the Kohen Gadol's body.
So it's very interesting you mentioned that, because we have another text, a small text that appears on the Kohen Gadol's head. The Asita Tzitz Zahav Tahor. You make a diadem of pure gold and engrave on it as on a seal, holy to the Lord, Kodesh Ladonai. So the Kohen was supposed to wear a kind of crown. I have a picture of it here. I'm going to bring it up to our camera here. Kodesh Ladonai. It probably wasn't written in that script. This is Ashurian square script. It's probably written in Paleo-Hebrew script, the pre-Hebrew script, or more like the Canaanite script. But the point is, exactly as you said, Jeremy, it's what is it? What's with the Jews wearing texts on their body? What is up with that? And can you just talk more about that sensibility when you are putting on tefillin? I think that tefillin is the closest way that we can reflect on inscribing on ourselves without actually writing on ourselves.
Well, you're doing pretty good. Just keep it up.
Keep it up, right? So, we like the text. We like the text around us. I mean, we're not talking about these Parsha, although we have, in the summer Parshiot with the Shema, we like text. We like having this, and I suppose there is a relationship between the wearing of text, the placing of text on your doorpost, to say that we don't represent God in any physical way, but we sure come to represent God's word in an actual way, which is the words. The actual texts are on our body. Go ahead.
Well, we have to think about what a word is. It has no physical substance for us. The only thing that has physical substance with a word is a text. Mm-hmm. So we can't crystallize God's word physically unless we write it down. And the Kohen is, in a sense, reaching for God. I was struck while you were talking, Elliot, if we come back to that image of the horizon where you look off and you see the blue and the white come together, that's where we sometimes think about meeting God.
Yeah.
But we have to meet God here in the here and now, not just in the out there. So we take the images of the horizon, the blue and the white, we wrap ourselves in our talit, we wear the words of God in our tefillin, we put them on our doorposts because we are trying in the course of our lives to embrace God. And that is a task that is never ending and never quite fulfilled forever. It's something that we have to keep coming back to.
We have in this parsha also the set of ceremonies that will ordain the Kohanim. They will designate.
That's
them.
how they become doctors of divinity.
Right. I had someone ask me this week. Maybe I'll ask you guys this week. So you know, we got all these beautiful clothes, and then they're going to sprinkle blood on them.
What?
They're going to sprinkle blood on the Kohanim. What's going on here? The significance of sprinkling blood is, as we said 2 weeks ago, it's to index, it is to designate. And their sense of squeamishness is not our sense of squeamishness. I think, you know, we are grossed out by the idea that blood is on things, but it's blood represents that which designates the holy. And here in this instance, we are instructing the Kohanim to be designated for God. Barry, you want to?
It's also a cleansing agent. When we cut ourselves, the blood comes to carry away the germs. And a lot of us, I in particular, sometimes feel squeamish when we see blood, but blood has a palliative and a therapeutic effect. And I think that for our ancestors, sprinkling the blood as they did on the altar, on the clothing, on the parochet, was a way of designating by cleansing. And when we think of the dominant vocabulary connected with the Mishkan of Torah and Tumah, purity and impurity, the blood comes to purify.
The interesting, I don't know what the exact word for this be, the range of meaning around clean and dirty, tahor tameh, and lehit chata, to cleanse with the word chatat, is an offering, and it is a bloody, dirty offering. You're killing an animal and spilling its blood, but it also, hu yit chata means he is cleansed, and we have that, by the way, in this week's Haftarah, and we have it certainly in the ritual of the red heifer, which we'll get in Numbers chapters 19. I do think it's right what you said about their sense of sprinkling blood was not you mucked it up and made it dirty, but that you somehow cleansed it. And I would say that one of the main, again, poetic kind of valences is Adam hu hanafesh. Life is blood. And this stuff, I mean, it's even the most intense of us nowadays in the 21st century understands the kind of symbolic and mythic qualities of religion. And I think that these practices were maybe a little less symbolic to them, and to ancient Israelites, to splash blood on it, I think this is a religion of not just ideas and stories and rules and all those things, yes, but also flesh and blood, and that's what gives its big power.
All right, so we've got a couple of minutes left, and we're recording this before Purim, and this will come out on Friday, which is on Purim itself. Let me just ask what makes Purim great? What makes the Megillah Esther great? What is this about? What is great about Purim? What is great about Esther? What is great about any text? Take anything you want. Tell us something great about Purim. Jeremy, go ahead.
I assume you're looking for an answer a little bit deeper than poppy seed hamantashen. But
you know what? Poppy seed hamantashen makes it great. Prune. I'm a prune man.
I think, first of all, as you all know, muntashen. Muntashen is what it is. It's poppy seed pockets is what it is, and that became Oznei Haman. But I want to insist on that interpretation. We had a wonderful program at our show on Zoom. There's a Mexican Jewish donut shop owner here, and she's in Brooklyn, but we had her give a lesson for the show Hamantash baking. It was a lot of fun. I think that Purim, to the extent that it's great, and it can be a little hard for those of us working in the synagogue rabbinate, but to the extent that it's great, it's the time of year when Judaism does not have to be so dang serious about everything.
Oh man, it's the most serious holiday.
It's serious wrapped in silly.
Yeah.
And the silliness gets to a serious dimension because you have to be able to laugh at yourself. And by the way, I think that American society, especially, those of us in our more liberal corners, and this is my corner too, we are taking ourselves extremely seriously these days. A little bit of laughing at yourself, laughing at the king, the book that does not mention God's name, the book in which the Jews, which God may be hiding, and our Jewish heroine is hiding, and it's all upside down. V'nahafochu, upside down. Got to be able to laugh at ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Very
So you can't go wrong laughing at yourself, or especially laughing at you. What I would add here is that it's a salvation history, and the good guys win. And as Jeremy alluded, things are topsy-turvy. What we expect is undone. What we never expect actually happens. And it raises questions, if we get beyond the silliness, although part of the silliness is there as well, about what is really Jewish identity, right? Mordechai is identified as a Jew, but is he Jewish? And that's a key question for us in the diaspora. What makes us Jewish? The other thing that I think makes Purim great is that it's the prequel to Pesach on the calendar, even though it's the consequence of Pesach in history. Meaning that when Purim comes a month later on the 15th of Nisan, we have our great story of redemption, Pesach. That is not a silly holiday, but if we don't take a moment, I think, to laugh and to frolic on Purim, then we won't necessarily appreciate Pesach when it comes a month later.
So I'm going
to answer the same question. What is your thing about Purim?
You know what? I'm gonna go to the most important verse on this year's reading for me. It's just Umi yodea im la'ed kazot higat lamachut. It's the what Mordechai says to Esther to motivate her to act. He says, "Who knows if you have attained the royal position for just such a crisis?" A very, very deep thought, which is you never know what's your moment. And all of us go through our lives with various points that are crucial decisions, and where lots of things and lots of consequences can be affected. And I think the fact that she understands from that she has to make decisions that will in the end save the Jewish people, I think is really, really crucial. You never know what your moment is, and you never know at what moment you've been chosen. And I think that's one of the more serious messages of the Book of Esther. I think the Book of Esther is a book that we need to take more seriously. We've wrapped it up in a lot of the play, which is wonderful, but there is at the core of the Book of Esther a real important message, as you touched on, about being a member of a minority and a majority, living in the diaspora, the experience of powerlessness, the relationship to God that is hidden, and also what your responsibility as a human being is at what particular time. So Esther, what makes Purim great, it raises these questions for me, even while you're sipping a little bit of scotch, a little bit of rye, or a little bit of whatever you like, some export Molson's or whatever it is for our Canadian friends watching.
The Shulchan Aruch says, there's a commentary in the Shulchan Aruch by Bo Diddley, who said you got to have one bourbon, one scotch,
and one beer. And on that note, I want to thank you all for watching. We are so delighted that you have spent some time with us. We wish you a beautiful Purim, a wonderful, joyful Purim, joyous Purim. Enjoy it, and a beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom from us at Parsha Talk. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.